I never thought I'd come home to find strangers already inside my house. Two men stood in my living room like they owned the place, khaki uniforms, steel-toed boots, clipboards in hand. One of them tapped on my mantle as if testing it for termites. The other glanced at me over his shoulder with a grin that wasn't friendly at all. My first instinct was anger. Who the hell are these guys? But then I saw Sarah. My wife was sitting calmly at the kitchen table, arms folded, her badge glinting faintly from where it hung on the chair. She didn't say a word, but her eyes met mine, steady and cold. "Afternoon, Mr. Adler," one of the men finally said. "Safety inspection, mandatory." His voice was slick, rehearsed, like he'd said those words 100 times before. I felt a sharp twist in my gut. They weren't firefighters. They weren't city officials. I knew a real inspection when I saw one. This wasn't it. And yet, the bold red sticker plastered across my front door said otherwise. It screamed hazard, violation, immediate compliance required. Anyone walking by would think my home was a ticking time bomb. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my breathing. Part of me wanted to throw them out right then. Another part told me to keep still, because Sarah hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. That calm look on her face meant something. Something was about to happen. The taller man leaned closer, his pen scratching across a form. "Repairs will run about $5,000. We'll need to start immediately." He smiled like a wolf sizing up his prey. That's when I noticed the tiny light blinking from the bookshelf. A hidden camera, mine, watching, recording, capturing every move. And in that instant, I knew. This wasn't just about my house. This was about exposing them. Because Sarah wasn't just my wife. She was the fire chief and the county sheriff, the highest authority on both fire safety and law enforcement in the entire county. And these fools had just tried to hustle the one woman who could shut down their scam from every angle imaginable. Morning used to be my favorite time of day. Before everything turned sour. That Tuesday began like any other. The sun came up slow over the rooftops, painting the sky a pale orange. The neighborhood looked calm, even beautiful. Lawns trimmed, sprinklers ticking, kids' bikes left on driveways. On the surface, it was the picture of suburban peace. I brewed my coffee, strong and bitter, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of fresh-cut grass. For a few minutes, I let myself believe life was normal. Birds sang. A delivery truck rumbled down the street. Somewhere, a dog barked. Then I saw it. A sheet of paper taped across my front door. Bold red. Thick block letters. My stomach tightened before I even read the words. Warning. Fire hazard. Mandatory inspection required. The paper clung to the wood like a scarlet brand. The kind of thing meant to shame you in front of neighbors. My heart started pounding as I yanked it free. The glue stuck to my fingers, leaving behind a sticky film. Inside, Sarah was already at the table with her coffee. She looked up when she heard me curse under my breath. "What is it this time?" she asked. I slapped the paper down in front of her. She read it once, then again. Her eyebrows knit together. "They can't do this," she said quietly. Not without notice, not without cause. But I could see something flicker in her eyes. Concern, maybe even anger. I walked through the house, checking every wall, every smoke detector, every outlet. Nothing was wrong. The place was solid, safer than half the homes in this subdivision. Yet, when I glanced outside, I realized we weren't the only ones. Up and down the block, I saw them. Identical red sheets slapped across doors like scarlet flags. Every house branded the same way. I marched over to Tom Miller's place across the street. He was already peeling the notice off his own door, muttering curses. "Can you believe this crap?" he growled when he saw me. "They're saying our wiring is faulty. Bulletin I replaced mine last year." I held up my notice. Same story here. That's when we both saw her, Linda Cross, HOA president, striding down the sidewalk in her tailored blazer like a queen surveying her kingdom. Clipboard in hand, lips pressed into a thin smile. She stopped at each house, nodding as if she were inspecting her subjects. And every door she passed bore the same red paper. She saw us staring and waved cheerfully, her voice carrying across the street. "Just a routine safety measure, gentlemen. Nothing to worry about. as long as everyone cooperates. My blood boiled. Cooperates. That word. Like we were school children, and she was the headmistress. Back inside, Sarah met me at the door. She'd been watching too. "They're setting something up," she said. "No kidding," I muttered. "The question is, what?" She looked at me for a long moment, then set her coffee cup down with a sharp click. "Mark, be careful. This feels wrong, wrong in a way that's bigger than just rules." I nodded, clutching the paper so hard it crumpled in my fist. And in that moment, the quiet dawn felt like a lie. The birds still sang, the sun still shone, but the neighborhood wasn't safe anymore, not even close. I'd heard plenty about Linda Cross long before I ever stood face to face with her. In our neighborhood, people didn't just know her name, they whispered it, like kids swapping ghost stories. She'd been HOA president for almost a decade, re-elected every year without challenge. Some said it was because she kept things in order. Others muttered it was because no one dared run against her. From a distance, Linda looked polished. Expensive blazer, pearls, perfectly styled hair that never seemed to move, even in the wind. She was the kind of woman who made you think she had everything under control. And maybe she did, if by control you meant everyone else's life. That morning, after the red notices went up, she finally came to my door. I was still fuming, holding the crumpled paper in my hand when the knock came. Sharp. 3 times, precise as a metronome. When I opened the door, there she was, clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. "Mr. Adler," she said, her tone smooth, rehearsed. "I see you've received the fire hazard notice." Her eyes flicked past me, scanning my living room, as if she had the right. I didn't invite her in, but she stepped across the threshold anyway. I stiffened. "You mind telling me what this is about?" I held up the paper. She smiled, a thin, tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Routine safety protocol. We've contracted specialists to inspect every property. There have been concerns." "Concerns?" I snapped. "Our wiring is fine. Everything's up to code. You know that." Linda tilted her head, like I was a stubborn child refusing to eat vegetables. "Well, perhaps, but compliance is mandatory. If you'd like to avoid penalties, I suggest full cooperation." The word penalties hung in the air like a storm cloud. Behind me, Sarah stepped into the room. She didn't say a word, but her badge was clipped to her belt now, visible, deliberate. I caught Linda's eyes flick down toward it. For a moment, her mask slipped. Just a flicker of irritation, quickly smoothed over. "Ah, Mrs. Adler," she said sweetly. "Always a pleasure. I trust you'll help your husband see reason." Sarah didn't flinch, didn't blink, just stared back with that calm, steady look that always unsettled people who thought they had power. Linda turned back to me, lowering her voice. "It would be unfortunate," she murmured, "if non-compliance were to escalate." There it was, the threat behind the smile. I clenched my jaw. Every instinct told me to throw her out, but I forced myself to stand still, to listen. Because something in Sarah's gaze said, "Wait, watch, let her talk." Linda finally clicked her pen, scribbled something on her clipboard, and pivoted toward the door. "Inspections begin tomorrow," she said lightly. "I'll expect full access." With that, she walked away, heels clicking on the pavement like gunshots. I watched her disappear down the block, neighbors glancing nervously as she passed. Some offered tight smiles, others looked away. No one dared confront her. In that moment, I understood. Linda Cross wasn't just running an HOA. She was running a kingdom. And in her kingdom, fear was the law. By the next morning, the neighborhood felt different. It wasn't just the red papers anymore. It was the silence. The kind of silence you notice only after it replaces something else. The chatter of kids at bus stops, the casual greetings across driveways. People weren't looking at each other. They were looking at their doors, their notices, their wallets. I stood on my porch, coffee cooling in my hands, and watched as 2 men in khaki uniforms went house to house. Not city inspectors, not fire marshals, just contractors, brought in by Linda. They carried tool belts and clipboards, moving with an authority they hadn't earned. At each house, they knocked, stepped inside, and re-emerged with papers signed. And at each house, the homeowner's face looked a little more defeated. When they reached the Millers, Tom stood firm at first. I heard his voice carry across the street. angry, booming, the kind of voice that usually got him his way. But within 15 minutes, his tone dropped. Then I saw him sign the paper. His wife, Jenny, stood behind him, clutching their baby like a shield. He caught my eye as the contractors left. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "They said we'd be fined $500 a day if we didn't comply," he muttered. I swore under my breath. $500 a day. That was extortion, plain and simple. By noon, the contractors had visited a dozen homes. Trucks lined the streets, equipment unloaded, as if a full-scale construction project had begun overnight. The noise of drills and hammers shattered the usual suburban calm. Inside, Sarah paced the living room. "They're moving fast," she said. "Too fast for this to be legal." I nodded. "She's trying to overwhelm us, scare us into paying before anyone questions it." Sarah leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "That's her mistake." But I wasn't so sure, because when I stepped outside again, I saw something that chilled me more than the red notices. A line of neighbors stood near the cul-de-sac, quietly waiting to speak to Linda herself. She sat behind a folding table, like some bureaucrat doling out permits. Clipboard, forms, even a little cash box. People were handing over checks on the spot. And Linda? She smiled at each one, that same thin smile I'd seen the day before. "Thank you for your cooperation," she said, voice honey-sweet. "We'll have everything resolved soon." It looked less like a safety program and more like tribute to a queen. I walked over, my fists clenched, but Sarah's voice echoed in my head. "Wait. Watch. Let her talk." So, I stood at the edge, silent, while neighbor after neighbor signed away their savings. Some looked ashamed, others looked relieved, like paying bought them safety. When it was over, Linda stood, surveying her little kingdom. Her gaze swept across the crowd until it landed on me. She didn't smile this time. She didn't need to. Her eyes said it all. "You're next." That night, the neighborhood felt like a different place. Trucks idled late into the evening. Work lights glared against houses, shadows stretching across lawns. Somewhere down the block, a baby cried. I sat at my kitchen table, the red notice still lying crumpled in front of me, and tried to steady my breathing. "This isn't just about money," Sarah said quietly. I looked up at her. "Then what?" Her jaw tightened. "Control. She's testing how far she can push." I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion pressing down on me. "And if no one pushes back?" Sarah met my eyes, steady and unflinching. "Then she wins." The weight of those words settled heavy in the room. Outside, drills whined, lights blazed, and Linda's empire grew stronger with every check signed. And all I could think was, tomorrow they'd be back at my door. The next morning, I expected another knock at the door, sharp, rehearsed, 3 times. But when it came, it was louder, impatient. And this time, Linda wasn't alone. She brought 2 of her khaki-clad contractors, clipboards tucked under their arms, tool belts clinking like weapons. "Mr. Adler," Linda said smoothly when I opened the door, "we're here for your inspection." I didn't move. "You mean your shakedown?" Her lips curved into that thin smile. "Call it what you like. The process is mandatory, unless, of course, you'd prefer the fine." She tapped her clipboard. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. Behind me, Sarah's voice carried across the room. "Actually," she said evenly, "before you step inside, I'll need to see your permits." Linda turned, surprised. Her eyes landed on Sarah. This time the badge clipped to her belt was unmistakable, glinting in the morning light. For the first time since I'd met her, Linda hesitated, just for a heartbeat. "Permits?" she repeated, her tone sharper now. "Yes," Sarah said, calm and firm. She stepped closer, every movement measured, controlled. "If this inspection is sanctioned by the county, there should be paperwork, authorization forms, license numbers for your contractors. Let's see them." The contractors shifted uneasily. One coughed, the other glanced at Linda, waiting for direction. Linda's mask faltered, only slightly, but I saw it. A crack. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed thin. Then she laughed high and brittle. "Really, Mrs. Adler," she said, "no need to get dramatic. We're all neighbors here. Surely you don't expect me to drag legal red tape into a simple safety matter." Sarah's gaze didn't waver. "That's exactly what I expect." The silence stretched, For a moment, the only sound was the buzz of a neighbor's lawnmower down the street. Finally, Linda snapped her clipboard shut. Very well. We'll return when you're ready to be reasonable. She turned sharply, heels striking the porch. The contractors followed, but not before one muttered something under his breath that sounded a lot like waste of time. I shut the door and exhaled hard. My hands were shaking. Sarah leaned against the wall, arms crossed, calm as ever. You see it now? She asked. I nodded slowly. She blinked. That's her weakness, Sarah said. She counts on fear, on people folding without asking questions. The moment you demand proof, permits, paperwork, her power slips. I sank into a chair, my head still buzzing. So what do we do? Call the county? Reporter? Sarah shook her head. Not yet. If we go too early, she'll bury us in excuses, spin it like a misunderstanding. We need her exposed, publicly, with evidence no one can deny. I thought of the blinking light on the bookshelf, my hidden camera, recording every word, every threat, every fake inspection. A slow smile crept across my face. You mean evidence like this? Sarah's eyes met mine. For the first time in days, she smiled too. Not big, not showy. Just enough to say, now we're getting somewhere. That night, I rewound the footage. Linda's voice filled the room, dripping with authority. Mandatory inspection. Penalties will escalate. It was all there, clear as day. But one moment stood out. When Sarah demanded permits and Linda faltered. That half-second of hesitation was worth more than all the threats in the world. It was proof she wasn't what she claimed. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something stirring under the fear. Not anger, not defiance. Hope. By the end of the week, the neighborhood didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield. Though no one had declared war out loud. The lines were invisible, but I could see them. On one side, the compliant. Those who'd signed the checks, let the contractors in, nodded along as Linda promised safety and compliance. They spoke in hushed tones, avoided eye contact, and clutched their wallets tighter. On the other side, the holdouts. Fewer of us, but noticeable. Doors closed when Linda's people came by. Notices torn down. Rumors whispered on porches when the sun went down. And in the middle, fear. Heavy, choking fear. I saw it in Jenny Miller's eyes when she walked past with the stroller, head down, moving fast. I saw it in old Mr. Perkins, who used to wave at everyone from his porch swing. Now he sat rigid, staring at the street like it had betrayed him. But the clearest sign came one evening when Tom Miller crossed my lawn. He looked worn down, shaved too quickly, eyes ringed dark from lack of sleep. They started tearing out my basement walls, he said without preamble. His voice cracked. They say there's black mold. Sarah? She says they can't show us the lab results. They just keep billing us. I clenched my fists. Tom, they're scamming you. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, well, I figured that out after the third invoice. Sarah stepped out from the kitchen, calm as ever. Do you want out? She asked him. Tom looked between us. For a second I thought he might say yes, but then his shoulders sagged. I can't, he muttered. Jenny's scared. We've already paid too much. If we pull out now, what if they retaliate? What if we lose the house? He left before I could answer. His words stuck to me like burrs. What if we lose the house? That was the trap Linda had built. A prison made out of fear and mortgages. That night, as Sarah and I reviewed the footage again, a knock came at the back door, quiet, cautious. I opened it to find Mrs. Daniels, the soft-spoken widow 2 houses down. She glanced over her shoulder before slipping inside. I don't have much time, she whispered, but I saw what you did, with Linda, asking for permits, the way she froze. Sarah leaned forward. And, Mrs. Daniels lowered her voice even further, I want to help. She's been bullying me since my husband passed. Fines, notices, threats. I paid once. Never again. From her purse she pulled out a small black notebook, pages filled with dates, amounts, copies of checks. I've been keeping records, she said. Every cent she's taken from me. I figured one day it might matter. I stared at the notebook like it was gold, because in a way, it was. Proof, hard evidence of the grift. Sarah took it gently. This matters more than you know. For the first time in weeks, Mrs. Daniels smiled, faint but real. Then use it, please, end this. After she left, I sat in silence. The neighborhood was splitting apart, yes, but cracks in Linda's power were spreading too, quietly, secretly. Some had chosen fear, but others, like Mrs. Daniels, were choosing to resist. The war wasn't just on our doorstep anymore, it was in the hearts of our neighbors, and that made it more dangerous and more hopeful. The black notebook sat on our kitchen table like it was glowing. Mrs. Daniels had slipped it into Sarah's hands with a trembling whisper, but inside those pages was something stronger than fear. Dates, checks, amounts, all carefully documented. Proof that Linda had been bleeding her dry for years. Sarah flipped through each line as though she was reading a map that didn't just lead back to Linda, it was Linda. Her greed, her arrogance, her lies, all laid out in neat handwriting. This isn't a complaint, Sarah murmured. It's evidence, hard evidence. For the first time in weeks, I felt something stir in me that wasn't anger or dread. Hope. But Sarah wasn't smiling. She set the notebook down, folded her arms, and fixed me with the kind of look she used to give rookies at the sheriff's office. One record isn't enough. We need a pattern, a trail, more than she can deny. That night, we sat together in the dim light, sketching out how to turn this neighborhood nightmare into a case. Not just defending ourselves anymore, but building something that could bring Linda's whole scam crashing down. The next morning, Linda came strutting up our driveway with her clipboard, her heels snapping against the concrete like gunshots. Normally, I would have torn her notice down before it stained the door, but this time, I left it there, fluttering in the breeze like bait on a hook. I even made a phone call on the porch, loud enough for the nosy neighbor across the street to hear. Maybe it's safer to just pay them. I don't want trouble. Sure enough, by sundown, Linda was back. She smiled at me like a cat that smelled fresh meat. "Mr. Adler," she purred, "I'm so relieved you've come to your senses. Let's talk about the repairs. The contractors can start immediately." Every word, every smug flick of her pen was being captured by the hidden camera behind the lamp in our living room. My heart hammered as she pushed a contract across the table. A cheap printout, with a fake county seal stamped at the top. It was laughable, but I didn't laugh. I kept my face straight, even nodded like a beaten man. "I'll review this with my wife," I said evenly. She left, satisfied, and Sarah picked up the contract the way she might pick up a piece of evidence at a crime scene. "Forgery," she muttered, holding it up to the light. This alone could end her. Word spread faster than we expected. Mrs. Daniels must have whispered to someone, because within days, 2 more families appeared at our back door, both carrying their own folders of documents, envelopes stuffed with letters from Linda, payment receipts, even a recording of her snarling over the phone about compliance fees. Each neighbor looked the same, tired, scared, guilty for not speaking sooner. They handed us their evidence like it was contraband, then begged us not to use their names. Sarah's calm steadied them. "You've already helped more than you realize," she said softly. "This isn't just about you. It's about all of us." Some refused, retreating back into their fear. But enough of them came forward to paint a picture. Linda had been running the same playbook for years. Threats, phony fines, illegal liens. Always just enough pressure to make people pay. Always hiding behind that false authority. Our dining room turned into something out of a detective's office. Papers spread across the table, folders marked with dates, a calendar pinned to the wall with Linda's visits circled in red ink, and in the middle of it all, Sarah, calm, focused, fierce. "This isn't just about catching her in the act," she told me one night as we double-checked the batteries on the cameras. "It's about breaking the fear. Once people see she can bleed, the whole house of cards comes down." I stared at the evidence laid out before us, at the blinking red light of the little camera on the counter, and I realized something. For weeks we'd been waiting, reacting, hiding. Now we weren't hiding anymore. We were hunting. That night, as we locked up the files, Sarah rested her hand on my shoulder. Her eyes, calm but unyielding, met mine. "You realize," she said quietly, "once this trap is sprung, there's no going back." I held her gaze, feeling the steady beat of adrenaline in my chest. "Good," I told her. I don't want to go back. The night before it all went down, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid. That stage had passed. This was different. The restless anticipation before a storm breaks, when the air feels charged and the trees stand unnaturally still. Sarah, calm as always, reviewed the files one last time while I paced the living room, listening to the faint hum of the hidden cameras. "This is it," I muttered. She didn't look up. "It has to be perfect." Linda arrived the next morning right on schedule. She was never late, never sloppy. That's what made her dangerous. Her car pulled into the driveway, polished to a shine, and she stepped out like she owned the block. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose, that familiar smirk etched across her face. I opened the door before she could knock. "Morning, Linda," I said, letting just enough resignation seep into my tone. "Come on in." She strutted inside, heels clicking against the hardwood, eyes scanning the room like a predator assessing territory. "Glad you've come around," she said sweetly. "Let's finalize the details today. I can have my contractors here within the hour. We'll need access to your basement, your garage, and—" Her voice trailed as she pulled out another stack of papers, crisp and freshly printed. "Oh, and there's a new compliance fee. Nothing major, just a formality." The hidden camera above the mantel blinked red. Every word, every false promise, every forged signature line, it was all being recorded. I took the papers, flipped through them slowly, letting her see my hands tremble. "This is a lot of money," I said softly. "Are you sure it's necessary?" Her smile sharpened. "If you want to keep your home, yes. It's necessary." Right there, I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I bit it back. This wasn't the time to explode. This was the time to let her hang herself. Just then, a knock echoed from the back door. Linda frowned, annoyed. "Expecting company?" she asked. I shrugged. "Maybe the Millers. They're worried too." Her smirk returned. "Good. I'll handle them after you." Sarah opened the door. Not the Millers, Mrs. Daniels. Behind her, another neighbor, clutching a folder. And behind him, a third, carrying a small voice recorder. Linda froze. Her confidence wavered, just for a flicker, before she masked it with a laugh. "Oh, how lovely, a gathering. But you all know this isn't how it works. These matters are handled privately, one household at a time." Mrs. Daniels' voice shook, but her words were clear. "We're done being quiet." The neighbor with the recorder held it up. "We've got you on tape, Linda. Every threat, every fake fine." Sarah stepped forward then, her sheriff's badge glinting as she laid it on the table. Linda's smirk faltered completely this time. "You've been impersonating county authority," Sarah said, her tone calm but lethal. "That's a crime. And you've been extorting these families. That's another." Linda's face went pale, but she tried to recover. This is absurd. These people signed contracts. They paid willingly. If they're too stupid to understand the law, that's not my problem. Except," I cut in, "those contracts are forged, and we have every one of them, along with witnesses, recordings, and financial records." I slid Mrs. Daniels' black notebook across the table toward her. Linda stared at it like it was a loaded gun. For the first time, she lost her composure. The mask cracked. Her voice rose, sharp and panicked. "You think anyone will believe you over me? I run this HOA. I make the rules here." Sarah didn't flinch. "No, Linda. You've been hiding behind rules, but rules don't make you untouchable. Laws do. And the law is standing right here." That was when Linda lunged, not physically, but verbally, spewing insults, threats, spittle flying. She pointed at each neighbor in turn, her voice shrill. "I'll ruin you, every last one of you. You'll regret crossing me." The camera captured it all. And in that moment, something shifted in the room. Fear didn't belong to the neighbors anymore. It belonged to her. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. For a long moment, silence hung heavy over the room. No one breathed. Then Mrs. Daniels let out a shaky laugh. "Did that just happen?" Sarah gathered the papers into a neat stack. "It did. And now," she said firmly, "we bring this to the county." One by one, the neighbors nodded, some with tears in their eyes, others with shaky relief. But all of them shared the same look. A weight had been lifted. The fear that had chained them for months was finally broken. I watched them, and I realized this wasn't just about taking Linda down anymore. It was about giving this community back its voice. And we weren't finished, not by a long shot. When Linda stormed out of our house, I thought that was the end of it. For one fragile moment, I allowed myself to believe she'd retreat, crawl back into whatever hole she came from, maybe even pack her bags and disappear. But people like Linda don't disappear. They double down. They come back meaner, louder, and more reckless. And sure enough, the storm broke before the week was out. It began with a letter, not taped to the door this time, stuffed right into our mailbox, folded and creased from her furious grip. No official seal, no signatures, no formatting. Just a single sheet of paper with bold, angry handwriting. You've made a big mistake. This neighborhood is mine. I read it twice, then slid it across the table to Sarah. She didn't say anything. She just tapped the corner of the paper with her finger, her jaw tight. "She's unraveling," Sarah finally said. "We rattled her. That means she'll escalate." Escalate she did. By the next morning, she was standing in the cul-de-sac with her clipboard, shouting orders like a drill sergeant. She barked at the Thompsons about their lawn, threatened the Millers over a supposed safety violation, and told Mrs. Daniels she'd be fined $1,500 if her trash bins weren't hidden within the hour. But something was different. This time, the neighbors didn't cower. They didn't mumble apologies or rush to comply. They stood there, arms crossed, silent, watching her with hard eyes. And I could see the cracks spreading through Linda's confidence. The more she raged, the less power she seemed to hold. Finally, when she turned and saw me watching from the porch, her face twisted. She jabbed her finger toward me, voice shrill. "You think you've won? You think anyone cares about your little stunt? I run this community, not you, not your wife, not these ungrateful freeloaders." I didn't answer, didn't need to. The camera in my pocket was recording every word. That night, she struck again, but this time from the shadows. At 2 a.m, the sound of smashing glass jolted us awake. I raced to the front door, Sarah right behind me, and found our mailbox lying in pieces on the curb. Spray painted across our driveway in dripping red letters were 2 words: "Get out." Sarah's hand closed around my arm. Her eyes were steady, but her voice was sharp. "This isn't just intimidation anymore. This is criminal." I wanted to chase her down, to catch her in the act, but Linda was already gone. All that remained was the hiss of the spray paint drying in the night air. The next day she made her boldest move yet. We woke to the sound of sirens, 2 patrol cars parked at the entrance to our street. Linda stood beside them, arms folded, lips curled in triumph. She had called in complaints, claimed Sarah was abusing her badge, that I was threatening residents, that we were the bullies. The officers approached, uncertain. They knew Sarah, respected her. But procedure was procedure. They asked questions, took statements, even glanced uneasily at the vandalism on our driveway. Linda, meanwhile, put on the performance of a lifetime. She clutched her pearls, faked tears, insisted she was being harassed by a rogue sheriff and her husband. "You don't understand," she wailed. "They're turning the whole neighborhood against me. I'm afraid for my safety." It might have worked, if not for the neighbors. One by one, they stepped forward, the Millers, Mrs. Daniels, even the quiet man from the corner lot, who rarely said more than 2 words to anyone. They told the officers about the fake fines, the threats, the forged documents. They showed receipts, recordings, even the spray paint still fresh on our driveway. By the time they were done, the officers weren't looking at Sarah or me anymore. They were looking at Linda, and Linda was shaking. But cornered animals lash out. That evening, she showed up again, this time with 2 hired men in a rusted pickup truck. Contractors, she claimed. She stood on the sidewalk shouting that repairs would begin immediately, that refusal was a violation of HOA law, that anyone who interfered would be sued into bankruptcy. The men looked uneasy. They hadn't signed up for a fight, but Linda shoved paperwork into their hands, her voice rising higher and higher. That's when Sarah stepped out, badge clipped to her belt, voice calm but unyielding. "Not one of you sets foot on this property. This is a criminal matter now. Leave, or you'll be arrested for trespassing." The men exchanged looks, then climbed back into their truck without a word. Linda screamed after them, furious, but they didn't stop. The truck peeled away, leaving her standing in the middle of the street, fists clenched, chest heaving. "You think this is over?" she spat at us. "You think you can humiliate me? I'll bury you." Her voice cracked. For the first time, it wasn't the voice of a woman in control. It was the voice of someone who knew she was losing. That night, Sarah and I sat in the kitchen, the notebook and recordings spread across the table. The air was heavy, tense, electric. "She's dangerous now," I said. "We've taken her power, and she's desperate to get it back. That's when people do stupid things." Sarah nodded. "Which means we're close. She's cornered. Tomorrow we take everything to the county prosecutor. But tonight," she glanced at the spray paint still visible outside. "Tonight, we stay alert." I looked at her, at the quiet steel in her eyes, and felt the truth settle deep in my chest. The storm wasn't over. It was about to break wide open. And when it did, we had to be ready. The meeting room was packed tighter than I'd ever seen it. Folding chairs scraped the linoleum floor. Neighbors pressed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with unease. At the front sat Linda, perched like a queen on her throne, clipboard clutched in her manicured hands. Her lips curved into a self-satisfied smirk. She thought tonight would be another coronation. But not tonight. I sat near the back, Sarah at my side. The little black notebook rested in her lap, along with our stack of files. Our cameras were rolling. Every second counted. Linda stood, clearing her throat with theatrical grace. "Good evening, everyone. As your acting president, I'm proud to announce our initiative to ensure compliance with community standards. A few properties, unfortunately, have failed inspection. I'll be outlining mandatory repairs and associated fees." Her words oozed through the room like oil. She pointed her pen at me. "Mr. Adler, for example, owes a significant sum for landscaping violations. If unpaid, the association may be forced to place a lien against his property." Gasps rippled. Some neighbors shrank back. Others stared at me with pity. Linda basked in it. That was when Sarah rose. Calm, steady. Her sheriff's badge glinting faintly beneath her blazer. "Actually," she said, her voice clear and sharp, "we need to pause here, because what Mrs. Hensley has been doing is not enforcement. It's extortion." The room stilled. Linda laughed, brittle and forced. "Excuse me? That's slander." Sarah opened the black notebook and held it up. "This isn't slander. It's documentation. Payments made directly to you, with no HOA records, no receipts, no board approval. That's fraud." The room buzzed. Neighbors craned their necks. Linda's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "Anyone could write that down." "Then maybe this will be harder to dismiss," Sarah cut in. She slid copies of contracts across the front table. Fake seals, false signatures. "You forged county documents. You threatened homeowners with liens you had no legal authority to file." I stood, my voice steady despite the hammering in my chest. "And we caught you on tape. Here." I pulled out the small projector we'd borrowed. On the wall behind Linda, her own voice filled the room. "Pay me directly and we can avoid penalties." Her eyes widened. She lunged for the projector, but Sarah stepped between them, calm as stone. Neighbors erupted. Some shouted, some cursed. A few, the ones who'd been bled for years, shouted with relief. Mrs. Daniels wept quietly in the corner. Linda stammered, searching for control. This is a witch hunt. None of this proves anything." That was when the door opened. The county fire marshal stepped inside, 2 deputies at his side. His uniform carried the weight of authority Linda could only pretend at. He held a folder. "Actually," he said, voice booming, "it proves enough." He held up a report. "Anonymous complaints led us to investigate. We found numerous fire code violations at your rental properties, false filings, and misappropriation of HOA funds." The deputies moved forward. Linda's mask cracked. "You can't arrest me! I am the HOA!" Sarah's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "No, Linda, you were a bully with a clipboard. That ends tonight." The deputies cuffed her, the metallic click echoing like a gavel striking. Linda shrieked, tried to twist free, but it was useless. The room thundered with voices, cheers, tears, even laughter. Years of fear broke apart in that single sound. The fire marshal turned to the crowd. "If anyone here has been coerced into payments, come to our office. We'll make sure you're heard." One by one, neighbors nodded, shoulders straightened. For the first time, people weren't looking at the floor. They were looking at each other. As Linda was dragged toward the door, she fixed her eyes on me. Pure hatred burned there, but beneath it was something new. Fear. Sarah squeezed my hand. Her badge caught the light. For weeks she'd hidden it. Now she stood revealed, not just my wife, but the sheriff who'd brought justice home. When the door slammed behind Linda, silence hung for a beat. Then Mrs. Daniels stepped forward, voice trembling. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing up when the rest of us couldn't." I swallowed hard. "No," I told her. "You gave us the courage. We just lit the match." That night, as we walked back across the quiet street, the air felt different, cleaner. The fear that had choked our neighborhood for so long was gone, replaced by something fragile but real. Hope. Sarah slipped her arm through mine. "You realize," she said softly, "this isn't just about stopping her. It's about reminding people they have power. They just forgot it." I nodded, staring at the house where Linda's notices once clung like scars. She thought the HOA was her kingdom, but it was never hers. It was ours. And for the first time, the street felt like home again. By morning, the street felt new, like someone had cracked a window in a stuffy room. The red notices were gone, ripped down in the night and crumpled into small, angry balls in recycling bins. A few neighbors laughed when they tore theirs off. A few cried. Most of us just stood there a moment longer than necessary. Hands on the doorframe, breathing air that didn't taste like threats. Mr. Ellison, the retired Marine 2 houses down, spotted me at the curb. For years he'd given the same tight nod, the kind men exchange when they don't intend to talk. Today he gave me a real one. "She had us all spooked," he said, gravel in his voice. "Took a pair to stand up like that." Before I could answer, Mrs. Daniels stepped out across the street, robe cinched tight, eyes wet. "I paid her," she said, not to me exactly, but to anyone listening. "For years, hundreds here, thousands there. I thought if I kept paying, she'd leave me alone." Her words rolled down the block and found other doors. Hinges creaked, people emerged, hugging coffee mugs like shields. She told me my son couldn't park his truck in our driveway, said it would lower values. She fined me for holiday lights. She said she'd put a lien on my home if I argued again. No one shouted, no one needed to. The quiet was heavy enough. It held shame and relief and the dull shock of waking from a long, complicated bad dream. By noon, the county had arrived. Clipboards, polo shirts, those little nylon pouches that jangled with pens. They split up in pairs and went door to door, records open, voices gentle. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a soft tone stopped on my steps and shook my hand like we were small-town acquaintances. "We'll unwind the liens," she said. "Any you can prove were fraudulent, we'll move to vacate. We'll help you document it." Then she looked over my shoulder toward the living room, where the cameras had once blinked red. "For what it's worth, this isn't the first time we've seen something like this. People get comfortable in power. Communities get tired. That's when rules stop being rules." Sarah stood behind me, badge visible now. No more hiding it under a cardigan or turning it inward so it wouldn't glint. Neighbors looked at her with a cocktail of gratitude and discomfort. Some leaned in to thank her, careful with their words, like talking to a doctor after a scary diagnosis. Others kept their distance. They weren't sure what to do with a hero who had also reminded them they'd stayed quiet. That evening, the board called another emergency meeting, this time without Linda, without the pearls, without the gavel, the same folding chairs, the same lemon cleaner smell, but the air had loosened a little. People didn't sit spine straight. They sat like humans. "Who's in charge now?" someone asked. "We still need an HOA," someone else said, already bracing for a fight they didn't want. A man in the back, one of the quiet ones you only know by his dog, stood with both hands in his pockets. "We can't pretend none of us saw it," he said. "We did. We saw it and we chose our lawns over our neighbors, our comfort over conflict. I did. I'm not pointing fingers." He looked down at his shoes. "I'm pointing them at me." Sarah didn't take the bait when eyes drifted her way. "I'm not here to run your board," she said. "That's not my lane. Stopping a crime was. The rest is yours." A dozen ideas tumbled out at once. Term limits, public budgets, rotating treasurers, 2 signatures on every check, open meetings, a hotline to the county when something smells wrong. Not perfect, not permanent. But it sounded like repair instead of regret. And that was new. When the chairs scraped back and people drifted home, the adrenaline drained out of my bones all at once. On the walk back, Sarah slipped her arm through mine, the way she does when she's just Mark's wife and not wearing a badge in her eyes. "You okay?" I asked. "Mostly." She smiled, small and tired. "I do this for a living, but never with my own porch light in the frame. That part's new." We stopped at our driveway where last week 2 red words had screamed, "Get out." A faint, chalky blush remained in the concrete where the county had power washed it for evidence. I stared at the ghost of it. "It sticks," I said. "Fear always does," she answered. "So does pride, so does shame. It fades, but it lingers." The days that followed were busy in a different way. Not contractors and threats, but documents. Photocopies spread across kitchen tables as casually as card games, receipts, emails, scans of notices with misspelled statutes and counterfeit seals. That was always my favorite tell, the arrogance of bad grammar. People traded stories like recipes. There were fights, too, at the mailboxes and under porch lights. One neighbor said Linda deserved everything she got and more. Another said power ruins everyone eventually, and we should burn the whole structure down. That argument worried me more than Linda's shouting ever had, the kind that says no one can be trusted, so why try? Cynicism dresses like wisdom. It's really just a softer kind of surrender. A week later, the fire marshal came by, the same woman who'd stood at the front of the room with a voice you couldn't ignore. She thanked Sarah again. She thanked me too, which felt undeserved. "Charges are filed," she said, matter of fact. "Fraud, forgery, impersonation, criminal mischief, and we're still sorting the money. It will be months. There will be hearings, subpoenas, probably press." After she left, I sat on the steps and watched late sun turn the street the color of tea. "Public," I said. "Public," Sarah echoed, lowering herself beside me. "You do it again?" she asked after a long quiet. "Every time." She nodded like she already knew. Change didn't arrive as a parade. It came as small, ordinary scenes that felt almost defiant. A teenager parked his pickup in his own driveway, and his mother didn't panic. Christmas lights went up 2 weeks early, and no one slipped a warning under the mat. Mr. Ellison fixed Mrs. Daniels' porch rail without being asked. Tom Miller stopped by with a pie he clearly hadn't baked, and apologized for signing so fast. He said he'd testify anyway. People reclaimed their front yards inch by inch, then remembered to look one another in the eye. Trust came back like grass after a hard winter, patchy, stubborn, greener in some yards than others. Some folks still looked over their shoulders before speaking, like Linda might materialize behind a hedge with a clipboard. Old habits die exactly as hard as the fear that taught them. One night, Sarah and I walked the loop at dusk, our shadows long and silly on the sidewalk. Porch lights clicked on one by one, like a slow-motion applause. Somewhere, a radio played an old song too quietly to identify. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood sounded like itself. "You know," she said, "we didn't just stop her. We reminded them of something they forgot." "What's that?" "That there's more of them than there is of any one person with a little bit of power and a lot of nerve." I thought about Mrs. Daniels' black notebook, the first true thing placed on our kitchen table, about Tom's envelope, hands shaking, about the quiet man in the back row who finally spoke. We hadn't been brave alone. We'd just been first and loud. The rest had been waiting to hear another voice, any voice, tell the truth out loud. Back home, I stood in the entryway and stared at the clean wood of our door, where the notice had once stuck so hard the glue stained. The grain ran warm under my palm. No paper, no glue, no warning, just a door. Before bed, I held Sarah's hand longer than usual. "You know they're going to ask you to join the new board," I said. "They already did," she said. "I told them no." She smiled at my raised eyebrow. "I enforce laws. I don't make bylaws. Besides, half of them still can't decide whether to bake me a casserole or avoid me at the grocery store. They'll come around, I said. Maybe, maybe not, but they'll show up. That's enough. I turned off the porch light. The house settled with those small noises all houses make, pipes tapping, wood remembering its wood. Somewhere, a sprinkler hissed alive. Somewhere, a television laughed. In the dark, I could hear my neighborhood breathing. What Linda took was obvious. Money, quiet, the feeling that your home is your home. What she left behind, we were just starting to measure. A sharper eye for fakes, a lower tolerance for bullies, and an unglamorous necessary habit, checking on each other. The fallout wasn't fireworks, it was work. But for once, it felt like the kind worth doing. The thing about a storm is this: it never stops exactly where it began. You can sweep your porch, you can scrub your windows, but the wind carries pieces farther than you ever imagined. That's how it was after Linda's empire cracked. The story didn't stay on our cul-de-sac. It spilled outward, first in the grocery store checkout line, where folks leaned in closer to their carts and murmured, "Did you hear about that HOA mess on Ashwood Drive?" Then at the diner downtown, where the regulars set down their coffee mugs just long enough to shake their heads. By the end of the week, it wasn't just whispers. It was talk radio. It was the evening news with a smiling anchor who made our misery sound like entertainment. I remember the first time I saw our street on television. A reporter in a bright blazer stood exactly where Sarah and I had once argued with Linda on the curb. Behind her, the familiar row of houses looked smaller, more fragile, under the glare of a camera light. "Neighbors say they lived in fear for years," the reporter announced, and the words hit me in the chest. Fear. Such a simple word. Such a long shadow. Sarah sat next to me on the couch, her jaw tight. "They're going to make it into a circus," she muttered. She wasn't wrong. Reporters always want a villain and a hero. They had both. And they wanted victims too, people willing to cry on cue, show their notices, shake their heads for the camera. Not everyone welcomed that attention. Some of our neighbors drew the blinds and stayed quiet. Others leaned into it, eager to finally be heard after years of silence. Mrs. Daniels, God bless her, stood on her porch in her Sunday dress and read from her little black notebook, while a cameraman nodded along. She looked 10 years younger when she finished, like shedding the secrecy had rolled the weight off her shoulders. The whispers grew leagues. Friends from outside town called me. My brother in Ohio left a voicemail. "Saw you on the news? What in the world's going on out there?" Even my old army buddy, who usually keeps conversation to football scores, texted, "That sheriff wife of yours? Damn, proud of her." With every call, every text, I felt the distance between the life we thought we had. A quiet neighborhood, a trimmed lawn, barbecues in the summer, and the one we were suddenly living, where strangers debated us over breakfast eggs. It was surreal, like standing outside your own house and realizing you've become the local folklore. But the strangest part wasn't the attention. It was the shift in people's posture. For years, no one looked one another in the eye. We lived behind fences, behind hedges, behind closed garage doors. After Linda fell, folks started lingering. At mailboxes, on sidewalks, at the school pickup line. They leaned closer when they spoke, dropped their voices like conspirators. She told me once she had friends in county records. I heard she forged letters from a law firm that doesn't exist. Someone said she kept a safe in her basement, filled with cash from fines. Rumors multiplied. Some were half true, some wild inventions. But each one carried a piece of something real, the suspicion, the anger, the long habit of believing in her shadow power. Sarah hated that part most. "It's not about the rumors," she told me one night when we walked past a cluster of neighbors trading stories like ghost tales. "It's about accountability. The facts are bad enough. We don't need fairy tales." Still, people needed to talk. After silence, the flood comes. And maybe gossip is just another way of mourning the years we lost. The county investigators kept coming, cars with government plates parked along our curb, doors slamming, folders tucked under arms. They spoke to everyone, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times. I saw neighbors pacing their porches afterward, rubbing their temples. Even truth can be exhausting when you've buried it for too long. And through it all, the whispers kept circling. At first, about Linda. then about us. Did you know Sarah's the sheriff? How could they not know? How did she hide that badge all this time? Maybe she wanted it this way. Maybe she set Linda up. She's the reason we're on the news. If she'd stayed quiet, it would have blown over. That one stung the most. Quiet. The word Linda loved best. The word that kept us all in line. Now some were using it like a cure we'd foolishly refused. One evening, Tom Miller knocked on our door again. He looked worse than before, hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled. He held out another envelope, this one empty. "They came to my work," he whispered. "Asked me questions. My boss heard. I think I'm going to lose my job." His eyes darted like a trapped animal's. Why couldn't this stay between us? Why did it have to get so big? I wanted to tell him the truth. That rot never stays contained, that it spreads until light finds it. Instead, I put a hand on his shoulder. "Because it already was big, Tom. You just didn't see it." He didn't answer. He just nodded and walked off, smaller somehow. Later, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold. "This is the hardest part," she said. "Not the fight, the aftermath. People don't know what to do when the fear's gone. Some of them miss it." I knew what she meant. Fear gives shape. It tells you where to stand, what to avoid, how to behave. Without it, you have to think for yourself again. Some folks find that freedom heavy. The whispers didn't stop. They only changed shape, from what she did to what we allowed, from how could she to why didn't we. Guilt has a way of echoing louder than anger. Still, I noticed something else. Amid the gossip and the doubt, neighbors lingered longer, shared more, checked in, asked if anyone needed a hand with their gutters or a ride to the store. Community, rough and clumsy, was waking up again. One Sunday, Mrs. Daniels invited half the street to her backyard for iced tea. We sat on mismatched lawn chairs, sweating under the late sun, and talked not about Linda, but about what came next. The whispers quieted. Laughter, real, tentative, shaky, took their place. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't polished, but it was ours. And as I sat there, listening to the low hum of voices, I realized something simple. Whispers aren't always poison. Sometimes they're the first shaky notes of a choir learning how to sing again.